July 12, 1943. Prokhorovka. Inside your T-34, you're sealed in steel at 120 degrees. You smell burning oil, cordite, fear sweat. Through the vision slit, all you see is a strip of hell. That's where Sergeant Dmitry Volkov was when he watched a man burn. The figure walked between the tanks, breathed head to toe in flames, orange and white hot, consuming nothing. No fuel source, no smoke, just constant fire. The burning man turned, looked directly at him, and kept walking. No fires in that sector, no explosions, and the man wasn't screaming, wasn't running, wasn't dying. Tank crews knew what burning looked like. This wasn't that. 6 crews saw him that day during the largest tank battle in history. Over 36 hours, 78 soldiers from both armies reported the same thing. Men on fire who wouldn't die. This is what happened at Kursk. Summer, 1943. The Eastern Front. The Third Reich and the Soviet Union were locked in a death grip that would determine the fate of Europe. Operation Citadel was Germany's gamble to break Soviet defenses near the city of Kursk. What followed became the largest tank battle in human history. 6,000 armored vehicles engaged in combat. Nearly 2 million men fought across a battlefield stretching over 150 miles. The fighting lasted 17 days, and the casualties were staggering. Conservative estimates put the number at 800,000 killed, wounded, or missing. But here's what matters for our story. The conditions. Inside a T-34 or a Panzer IV, you were sealed in a steel coffin filled with diesel fumes and engine heat. Vision slits gave you only narrow glimpses of the hell outside, as in temperatures inside could reach 120 degrees Fahrenheit during summer combat. And then there was the fire. Tank crews lived with one primal fear above all others: cooking alive. A penetrating hit meant fuel ignition and ammunition detonation. Your crew had maybe 10 seconds to bail out before the interior became an oven, if you were lucky. Soviet tankers called their T-34s coffins on tracks. And 60% of tank crews who took a penetrating hit died inside their vehicles. Burning. These men knew what fire looked like. They'd seen comrades stumble from hatches with uniforms ablaze and skin melting. They'd heard the screaming. They knew how a burning man moved, running, thrashing, collapsing within seconds as shock set in. So when veteran tank commanders, men who'd seen the worst ways to die, started reporting something different, something impossible, people should have listened. July 12th, 1943. Prokhorovka. The bloodiest day of the bloodiest battle. And something walked among the tanks, something that burned. Sergeant Dmitry Volkov had been watching the smoke for 3 hours. Through the narrow vision slit of his T-34, the world was reduced to a horizontal strip of gray and orange. Burning wrecks, cratered earth, and bodies. The engine idled while his crew sat silent inside the steel box, breathing diesel fumes and watching their sectors. Volkov pressed his eye closer to the slit, scanning the killing ground to the east. Movement. He blinked and refocused. A figure was walking between 2 destroyed Panzers, maybe 80 meters out, completely on fire. Dmitry Volkov was 26 years old, a veteran of Stalingrad, where he'd learned that survival meant staying calm when everything around you was dying. He'd commanded this T-34 for 8 months and knew every rattle, every flaw, and every member of his crew. Corporal Petrov manned the gun with young but steady hands. Private Antonov, the loader, was a farm boy from Ukraine, strong as an ox. Private Kuzlov drove the tank, half deaf from a near miss 3 weeks back, but able to navigate by feel. and radio operator Mikhailov, 19 years old and terrified, hadn't broken yet. They'd been in position since dawn, hulled down behind a low ridge covering the eastern approach to Prokhorovka. The morning had brought fire as German armor pushed through the smoke and Soviet tanks moved to meet them. The sound, God, the sound, metal tearing, explosions that made your bones shake, men screaming over the radio. By noon, the sector had gone quiet. Wrecks smoldered, the wounded were evacuated or dead, and Volkov's tank remained untouched. And they'd fired 4 rounds and scored 1 hit on a Panzer III that limped away trailing smoke. Otherwise, they'd watched. Now, at 14:30 hours in the mid-afternoon heat, sweat stung Volkov's eyes and the air tasted like copper and oil. He scanned his sector methodically, left to right and back again, looking for infantry, anti-tank teams, anything that might kill them. That's when he saw the figure. At first, Volkov thought it was a German soldier, wounded and stumbling. But no. The figure walked steadily and purposefully, and the fire. Orange flames wrapped around the shape from head to foot, bright and consuming, but not consuming. Volkov had seen men burn. In Stalingrad, he'd watched a flamethrower team get hit by return fire. The operator's fuel tank ruptured, and the man became a torch, screaming and running in circles before collapsing within 20 seconds, dead within a minute. This figure had been in Volkov's field of view for at least 30 seconds already, walking without running, making no sound, no screaming, just walking. "Petrov," Volkov said quietly. 11 o'clock, 80 meters. "Tell me what you see." The gunner shifted to his periscope. "Commander, I see smoke, multiple wrecks, between the 2 Panzers, the burned out ones. Look there." A pause. Then Petrov's voice came quieter. I see movement." "Describe it." "A man, I think. Walking. He's... Commander, is he on fire?" "How long have you been watching him?" 10 seconds, maybe 15. "He was burning before you looked. At least a minute now." "That's not possible." Inside the tank, the temperature felt like it dropped 10 degrees. Radio operator Mikhailov spoke up, his voice young and frightened. "Comrade Sergeant, I can see him too, through my slit." 3 men now, all watching. The figure continued walking west to east, parallel to their position, maybe 70 meters out now. Volkov forced himself to analyze what he was seeing with clinical detachment. Height, normal, perhaps 1.7 meters, average. Build, impossible to tell through the flames. Uniform, couldn't identify. The fire obscured everything. Gait, steady and measured, each step the same length as the last, not stumbling, not thrashing, moving like a man on patrol. The flames themselves were wrong. Orange, yes, but too bright, too consistent. Real fire flickers and dances, changes intensity with wind and fuel. But this fire burned at a constant rate, like it wasn't consuming anything, like it was just there around the figure, part of it. Antonov, the loader, spoke up with his older, gruff voice. "Comrade Sergeant, what is that?" "I don't know." "Should we report it?" "Report what? That we're seeing things?" "We're all seeing it." "I know." The figure walked between the 2 destroyed German tanks, passing through the space where the kill had happened, where Soviet rounds had punched through Krupp steel and turned men into meat. It didn't avoid the debris or step around the shell craters, just walked through everything. 60 meters now, close enough that Volkov could see the flames clearly. No smoke trail. That was the detail that made his chest tight. Fire creates smoke, always. Burning flesh, burning cloth, burning anything produces smoke. But this figure produced none, just pure flame, clean and bright. Kuslov, in the driver, spoke for the first time, his voice rough. Comrade Sergeant, I served with a flamethrower company in '42. Seen every type of burn there is. And? That's not fire. What is it? Don't know. But fire doesn't burn like that, not for that long, not without fuel, not without... He trailed off. Keep watching, all of you. I want confirmation this is real. It's real, Comrade Sergeant, Mikhailov said, barely audible. Then we watch. 50 meters. The figure stopped, just stopped walking and stood there in the middle of the killing ground, burning. Volkov's hand moved to his sidearm on instinct, a stupid, useless instinct. What would a Tokarev pistol do against whatever that was? The figure turned to 90 degrees with the precision of a drill movement and faced directly toward Volkov's tank, directly toward his vision slit. Volkov could see it clearly now. The flames wrapped around a humanoid form with arms, legs, torso, and head. But where the face should be was darkness. Not shadow, not obscured by fire. Just absence. A hollow space where a face should exist, empty. And Volkov knew with absolute certainty that made his skin crawl that it was looking at him. Seeing him through the flames, through the steel, through everything. Comrade Sergeant. Petrov's voice was a strangled whisper. I see it. It's looking at us. I know. Should I fire? Volkov's throat was dry, his hand on the sidearm grip slick with sweat. Should they fire? The main gun would obliterate whatever that was, but what if it didn't? What if the shell just passed through? What if they made it angry? No. Hold fire. Commander, it's not attacking. Hold fire. The figure stood there, burning and watching, for exactly 30 seconds. Volkov counted them, 1, 2, 3, each second lasting an eternity. 28, 29, 30. The figure turned away with the same precise movement, 90 degrees, and continued walking east toward the German lines with the same measured pace and burning intensity. Volkov watched through his optics as it disappeared into the smoke. Gone. For a full minute, nobody spoke. Volkov kept his eye pressed to the vision slit, scanning and waiting for it to come back. It didn't. The radio crackled to life. All units, maintain position. Artillery strike inbound, coordinates. The war continued as if nothing had happened. Comrade Sergeant, Mikhailov said with a shaky voice. What was that? I don't know. Mikhailov. Should we report what? That we saw a man on fire who wouldn't die? That it looked at us? They'll pull us from the line and send us for psychiatric evaluation. But we all saw it. I know. Then, we say nothing. Check your ammunition. Check the fuel gauge. We're still in a combat zone. Focus on what we can fight. They tried, but Volkov caught them glancing at their vision slits, scanning the smoke, looking for it. He was doing the same. The fighting resumed an hour later with a German counterattack. Volkov's tank fired 8 rounds and scored 2 hits. Normal combat, normal war. He didn't see the burning figure again that day. That night, during resupply, Volkov overheard 2 commanders from another company talking quietly, away from the political officers. One of them was describing something he'd seen that afternoon. A man on fire, walking between the wrecks, wouldn't die. Same time as Volkov's sighting, same sector, different burning figure. Volkov said nothing, walked back to his tank and tried not to think about the hollow space where the face should have been. Volkov never filed a report, and neither did the other Soviet commanders who saw the burning figures that day. Too strange, too impossible, too easy to dismiss as combat fatigue or smoke inhalation. But here's what the Soviet archives didn't capture. The Germans saw them too. When researchers opened the Wehrmacht after-action reports decades later, they found something remarkable. Same date, July 12, 1943. Same location, Prokhorovka sector. Same phenomenon. And German panzer crews describing brennende Gestalten, burning figures, walking through the kill zones, not dying. One report stood out, filed by Hauptmann Ernst Fischer, a Tiger tank commander known for precision, for detailed observation, for never exaggerating. His report was thorough. Hauptmann Ernst Fischer had been observing the battlefield for 4 hours. From the commander's cupola of his Tiger, he had a better view than most. 6 vision ports, a rotating cupola, and the best optics the Wehrmacht could provide. He'd used them to count 19 destroyed Soviet tanks, identify 3 enemy observation posts, and track the movement of at least 2 Soviet infantry companies. Fischer was good at his job, which is why what he saw at 15-20 hours made him stop breathing. 3 figures walking in formation across the killing ground, all 3 completely engulfed in flames. Ernst Fischer was 41 years old for a panzer commander. He'd fought in France, North Africa, and now the endless Russian steppe. A professional soldier, not a Nazi fanatic, not a coward. Just a man who'd learned that survival meant observation, a discipline, and never panicking. His crew reflected that discipline. Obergefreiter Klein, the 43-year-old gunner and former schoolteacher, could place a round through a vision slit at 800 meters. Unteroffizier Bauer, the young but strong loader, could cycle rounds faster than any loader in the company. Gefreiter Hartmann, the quiet and efficient radio operator, never missed a transmission. And Fahrer Schmidt, the 26-year-old driver, could feel the terrain through the Tiger's controls like it was an extension of his body. They'd been in position since noon, hull down on a low rise 3 kilometers south of Prokhorovka, on overwatch, watching Soviet approach routes and calling in targets for artillery. The morning's fighting had been brutal, as the Soviets threw wave after wave of T-34s at the German lines. Fischer's Tiger had engaged at long range with 7 confirmed kills and 1 probable. By 1500 hours, the sector had gone quiet. Smoke drifted across the battlefield, wrecks smoldered, and the dead lay where they'd fallen. Fischer scanned methodically from left to right, identifying threats and marking positions for future reference. That's when he saw them. 3 figures approximately 200 meters northeast of his position, walking in a line with 10 meters between each, moving west to east toward the Soviet lines, and burning. Fischer had been a soldier for 20 years and knew what men on fire looked like. He'd seen a Panzer III crew bail out after a penetrating hit in France. The driver's uniform caught, and the man ran 15 meters before collapsing. But he'd seen a supply truck hit by Soviet artillery in Kursk, with 3 men emerging burning, all dead within 30 seconds. This was different. The figures walked at a normal pace, steady and measured, not running, not staggering, not collapsing, just walking. Each one moved identically with the same stride length and pace, like soldiers on parade, except for the flames. "Klein?" Fischer said calmly but with an edge. "Northeast, 200 meters. Tell me what you see." The gunner shifted to his optics. "Herr Hauptmann, I see smoke, burning wrecks. Beyond the T-34 wreck, the burned out one. 3 figures in line." A pause, then Klein's voice came quieter. "Mein Gott. You see them? They're on fire, all 3. How long have you been observing them?" 5 seconds, maybe 10. "I've been watching for 30, and they haven't stopped burning and haven't fallen." Bauer, the younger loader, spoke up with uncertainty. "Herr Hauptmann, what are they?" "I don't know, Bauer." Fisher pulled his binoculars and forced himself to observe clinically, to document. Height: normal, approximately 1.8 meters, all three identical. Build: impossible to determine through flames. Uniforms: couldn't identify. No Soviet brown, no German gray, just flames obscuring everything. The flames themselves were orange at the edges and white-hot at the core with consistent intensity across all three figures. No flickering, no variation with the wind, just steady, impossible burning. And here's what made Fisher's training fail him: no heat distortion. At 200 meters, burning figures should create visible heat shimmer, distortion in the air. Fisher had observed burning tanks at this range, and the air above them rippled like water. These figures showed nothing, no shimmer, no distortion, just flame wrapped around human shapes. Hartman, radio to Tiger 2 and Tiger 3. Ask if they have visual on three figures, northeast of our position. Jawohl, Herr Hauptmann. 30 seconds later, Hartman reported, Herr Hauptmann, Tiger 2 confirms visual on three burning figures. Tiger 3 also confirms. Distance from their positions? Tiger 2 reports approximately 300 meters. Tiger 3, 250. 9 men across 3 tigers, all watching the same impossible thing. The figures continued walking, parallel to the German position now, ignoring the tanks, ignoring the war, moving with mechanical precision toward the Soviet lines. Herr Hauptmann, should we engage? Klein asked. Fisher considered. The figures weren't hostile, hadn't deviated toward German positions, weren't attacking. But they were wrong. Everything about this was wrong. Bauer, load high explosive. Loaded, Herr Hauptmann. Klein, warning shot. 50 meters ahead of the lead figure, ground impact. 50 meters ahead. Jawohl. Target acquired. Fire. The 88mm cannon fired with a massive boom that echoed across the steppe. The round impacted exactly where Fisher had called it, 50 meters ahead of the lead figure. Dirt and debris fountained up and smoke billowed. The three figures didn't react, didn't flinch, didn't stop, didn't alter course. They walked through the impact zone as the dirt was still falling. Herr Hauptmann, they didn't... Klein's voice was shaken. I saw. What are they? Continue observing. The figures emerged from the dust cloud, still burning, still walking. 150 meters from Fisher's position now, close enough that he could see details even without binoculars. The flames were wrong. Fire consumes, fire spreads, fire dies when it runs out of fuel. These flames did none of that. They burned at constant intensity, wrapped around the figures like a second skin, like the fire was part of them or they were part of the fire. Fisher pulled his binoculars up and focused on the middle figure, trying to see through the flames to what was beneath. For just 1 second, the flames seemed to thin, and Fisher saw nothing. Not a person obscured by fire, not a body, just the shape of a person made of flame. Hollow inside, a walking bonfire in human form. Unmöglich, Fisher whispered. The figures reached a destroyed T-34 that Fisher had knocked out at dawn. The crew's bodies still lay nearby, Soviets dead 6 hours. The three burning figures walked past them without acknowledging them, without slowing, just walked past the dead, past the wreckage, into the smoke drifting from a fuel fire. Fisher watched through his optics, waiting for them to emerge from the other side. They didn't. The smoke thinned after 2 minutes with clear visibility beyond, but the figures were gone. For a long moment, nobody in the Tiger spoke. Herr Hauptmann, Klein said carefully. Did we just see? Document the time, 1547. Document the observation. 3 unidentified figures, engulfed in flames, walking east toward Soviet lines, observed by Tigers 1, 2, and 3. No hostile action. He disappeared into smoke. Should I report to battalion? Yes, exactly as I stated. Nothing more. The battle resumed an hour later. Fisher's Tiger engaged 4 more Soviet tanks before nightfall. Normal combat, normal war. He didn't see the burning figures again. But 30 years later, when a military historian found Fisher in a small town in Bavaria and asked about his Kursk report, the old man's hands shook as he described what he'd seen. No heat distortion, he said. That's what I couldn't explain. Fire creates heat, heat creates shimmer. Basic physics. Those things broke physics. Volkov watched from inside his tank. Fisher observed from his cupola. Both at distance, both protected by armor. What happened to Lieutenant Alexei Petrov was different, because his tank was disabled, because his crew was dead, and because when the burning figure appeared, he was standing in an open crater, alone with nowhere to run. July 13th, 1943. The day after Volkov's sighting, the day after Fisher's. The burning men were still walking, and one of them came for Petrov. Lieutenant Alexei Petrov was 23 years old and had been a tank commander for 6 weeks. The German anti-tank round punched through his T-34's side armor at 13:42 hours. The driver died instantly from shrapnel through the skull. The gunner lasted maybe 10 seconds, screaming and then silent. The loader and radio operator bailed out and ran east, and Petrov never saw them again. He crawled through the commander's hatch, dropped into a shell crater 5 meters from his burning tank, and lay there shaking with ears ringing, tasting blood and smoke. That's when he heard the footsteps. Alexei Petrov was an orphan. His parents died in the siege of Leningrad during the winter of '42 from starvation. He joined the Red Army because he had nowhere else to go, no family, no home. The tank crew had become his family, and now they were dead. He checked himself for wounds. Hands shaking but functional, legs bruised but working, head cut above the right eye and bleeding into his vision. Tokarev pistol still in holster with 7 rounds. The crater was maybe 2 meters across and half a meter deep. German and Soviet bodies lay nearby, dead since morning and already starting to bloat in the July heat. His tank burned 20 meters to the west with black smoke rising. To the east lay open ground. 200 meters to the Soviet lines, might as well be 200 kilometers. German infantry were somewhere to the north. He'd heard them advancing 15 minutes ago. If they found him, he'd be captured or killed. He should run, should try for Soviet lines, but his legs wouldn't work yet. The impact had rattled something loose inside him. Just need a minute, 1 minute, then run, when the footsteps continued, steady and measured, coming from the north. Petrov pressed himself against the crater's edge with his pistol up, watching the rim. German infantry, had to be. The figure appeared at the crater's edge, not German infantry. The figure stood at the rim of the crater, 3 meters away, burning from head to foot with flames wrapping around a human shape. Orange at the edges, white at the core, so bright Petrov had to squint, but not hot. That was the first wrong thing. At 3 meters, fire should be unbearable, should sear the skin and make the air shimmer. Petrov felt warmth like standing near a stove. Comfortable almost, not the inferno he was seeing. The figure didn't move, just stood there at the crater's edge, looking down, looking at him. Petrov raised his Tokarev with a hand shaking so badly he could barely aim. "Stay back," Petrov said hoarsely. "I'll shoot." The figure didn't react, didn't speak, Didn't move, just burned. Petrov's finger tightened on the trigger. 7 rounds, center mass. Even shaking, he couldn't miss at 3 meters. But something stopped him. Not mercy or confusion, but pure animal fear that whatever this was, bullets wouldn't stop it, might make it angry. The figure stepped forward, down into the crater. 1 step, precise and deliberate. Now 2 meters away. Petrov scrambled backward until his back hit the opposite crater wall. Nowhere left to go. What are you?" Petrov asked, barely audible. No answer. The figure took another step. 1 meter. Close enough now that Petrov could see details. The flames didn't flicker or dance. They moved, yes, but wrong. Like they were painted on or projected, not consuming fuel, not spreading, not dying, just there. Constant and impossible. And through the flames, Petrov forced himself to look, to see what was inside the fire. Shape. Human with arms, legs, torso, and head, all the right proportions. But the details, the face, where eyes should be, were voids, empty spaces like someone had cut holes in reality. Where a mouth should be was more darkness, a vertical slit longer than a human mouth, and it was opening, not wide, just a crack. And from that crack came a sound. Breathing, but wrong. Too slow, too deep, rasping, in and out, but no chest movement, no rhythm matching a human. The sound came from the slit, the mouth that wasn't a mouth, slow and methodical, like something remembering how breathing worked, practicing it. "Off, please," Petrov whispered. He didn't know what he was asking for. Mercy, understanding, for it to leave, for this to not be real. The figure moved closer, 1/2 meter, arm's length. Petrov could have reached out and touched it. He didn't. The heat, or what should have been heat, increased slightly. Still not burning, still not unbearable, just wrong. Like the warmth of something that had been alive once, but wasn't anymore. And then the figure raised its arm slowly, so slowly. The burning arm extended with hand, reaching toward Petrov's face, fingers spreading. Petrov pressed himself against the crater wall with pistol forgotten and mind blank with terror. The hand came closer, 10 centimeters from his face, 5. Petrov could see through the flames now, could see the hand, and it wasn't a hand. It was the shape of a hand, the outline, but made of nothing. Darkness, absence. The flames wrapped around an emptiness, a human-shaped hole in the world, and it was reaching for him. The artillery barrage saved his life. German guns targeting the Soviet position to the east. The first shell landed 30 meters away, and the concussion wave hit the crater with dirt, debris, and smoke. Petrov threw his arms over his head and curled into a ball as more shells fell closer, the Germans walking their fire across the field. The world became noise and pressure and terror. When Petrov looked up, the figure was gone. Just gone. No footsteps leaving, no shape disappearing into smoke. One moment reaching for him, the next, an empty crater. Petrov alone. He lay there for what felt like hours. Might have been minutes, might have been seconds. Time didn't work right anymore. Eventually, then he heard voices. Soviet, his own side, a recovery team collecting the wounded and looking for survivors. "Over here, crater, someone's alive." They found him curled at the bottom, shaking with eyes wide and unresponsive. "Comrade Lieutenant, can you walk?" Petrov tried to answer, but couldn't speak, couldn't move, just stared at where the figure had been, where it had reached for him. They carried him back to Soviet lines, listed him as wounded from combat shock. He spent 2 weeks in a field hospital. Doctors said there was nothing physically wrong with him, no serious injuries, just the cut on his forehead. But he wouldn't speak, wouldn't eat unless forced. wouldn't sleep, just sat staring. On the 15th day, a Soviet military researcher visited, as part of a special unit documenting unusual combat experiences. He sat with Petrov for 3 hours, patient and quiet, just listening. Finally, Petrov spoke. It reached for me. What did, Comrade Lieutenant? The burning man. He was empty inside, just nothing. And he reached for my face. I think it wanted to show me something or take something. I don't know. What do you think it was? Everyone who burned. All of them. Every tanker who cooked alive in their machines. I think their deaths, all happening at once, in the same way, created something. Created what? A ghost, but not of one person, of one death. The death by fire, a manifestation of that specific way to die. And I think it was drawn to me because my tank was burning, because I was supposed to burn too. Maybe it was confused at why I was still alive when I should be burning. Do you believe this, truly? I don't know what I believe anymore. I only know what I saw, and I know it's still out there, still walking, still burning, still reaching. The interview ended there. The researcher filed his report, which was classified and buried with the others. Petrov was transferred to a different unit 2 weeks later. He served out the war and survived. In 1947, he gave a second interview to military researchers. 44 years old now, older and steadier. But when asked about Kursk, his hand still shook. I've had 4 years to think about it, Petrov said. Every night I've thought about it. And yes, I believe it was a manifestation, but not the way I first described. I said it was the ghost of everyone who burned, all of them together. But I think it was something older. I think burning, that specific death, has always created something throughout all of human history. Every time someone burned alive, a piece of that death remained. Small pieces scattered, not enough to be seen. But at Prokhorovka, thousands died by fire in hours, in the same place. I think all those small pieces came together. I think for 36 hours, we saw what burning really is. Not just a way to die, but something that exists, something that hungers, something that remembers. That's a disturbing theory, comrade. I was 5 meters from its face. I saw what it was, or what it wasn't. The hand that reached for you, what do you think it wanted? I think it was confused. My tank was burning, my crew was burning, everything around me was burning. But I wasn't. I think it reached for me to understand why. Why was I still alive when I should be burning? Sometimes I wish I'd let it touch me, just to know, to understand. But I think if I had... He paused. I think I'd still be burning. The interview ended there. The researcher filed his report, which was classified and buried. Alexei Petrov died in 1989 at age 69 from natural causes. According to his daughter, he never spoke about the war except once near the end. Fever from pneumonia made him delirious, and he kept saying the same thing. It's still reaching, still reaching. Three witnesses, 3 encounters, 3 impossible moments. But they weren't alone. When Soviet military archives were partially opened in the 1990s, researchers found something disturbing. 47 separate reports from Prokhorovka, all filed between July 12th and July 14th, 1943, all describing the same phenomenon. The German Wehrmacht archives held 31 more. Same dates, same location, same descriptions. 78 total witness accounts from trained soldiers. tank commanders, artillery observers, infantry officers, and combat engineers. Men who'd seen death, who knew what burning looked like, who understood the difference between reality and hallucination. All reporting figures engulfed in flames, walking through the battlefield, not dying. All dismissed, all buried in classified files, all preserved, when the reports showed a pattern. Time frame, 36 hours, from noon on July 12th to midnight on July 13th. Geographic area, 15-mile radius centered on Prokhorovka. Peak sightings, between 1400 and 1800 hours on July 12th, the bloodiest 4 hours of the bloodiest day. Common elements appeared across all 78 reports. Figures completely engulfed in flames with orange and white fire of consistent intensity. Humans shaped with normal proportions and walking upright, moving at normal pace without running or collapsing. Duration of burning from minimum 30 seconds to maximum 15 minutes observed. No fuel source visible, no smoke trails, and no burned remains ever found. Movement patterns were consistent, always toward enemy lines. Soviet figures walked toward German positions, and German figures, when identified by uniform remnants, walked toward Soviet lines. Never away from battle, always toward it. The reports were filed separately by different units at different times and different locations within the sector. No coordination, no communication between witnesses before documentation. Yet the descriptions matched down to specific details. The hollow faces, the wrong heat, the mechanical movement, the sense of being watched, the feeling of wrongness, and the silence. All 78 witnesses reported the same thing. The burning figures made no sound. After July 14th, 1943, the sightings stopped completely. The battle continued for 3 more days, and the dying continued. But the burning men were gone, as if whatever had manifested during those 36 hours had finished or moved on or simply stopped being. Or official Soviet response: mass hallucination, smoke inhalation, combat fatigue. German response: the same. Both sides dismissed their own soldiers' reports, but both sides kept the files, classified and buried and preserved, waiting for someone to ask the right questions. To understand what might have happened at Prokhorovka, you need to understand the scale of death. July 12th, 1943. The single bloodiest day of tank warfare in human history. Soviet forces sustained approximately 235,000 casualties, killed, wounded, or missing. German forces estimated 150,000. In one day, nearly 400,000 human beings were dead, dying, or shattered. The tank crews had it worst. Over 800 armored vehicles were destroyed on July 12th alone. 5 men per tank, average, meant 4,000 tank crew members, and most of them burned. Inside a tank, a fire is the death, the one every crew feared above all others. A penetrating hit meant seconds to escape if the ammunition cooked off, and there was no time at all. Hatches jammed from impact, metal warped from heat, and men were trapped inside as temperatures reached 1,000 degrees. Some made it out and stumbled from their machines with uniforms burning and skin melting. Most didn't make it far. 4,000 men dying the same death in the same place within hours of each other. Petrov's theory that this mass death created something, manifested something, doesn't sound so impossible when you consider the numbers. 4,000 deaths by fire, concentrated in a 15-mile radius, all within the same day. That much dying, that much fear, that much pain, all focused on one specific way to die. Maybe it did create something. Or maybe it opened a door, and for 36 hours, something walked through. If you've heard similar stories from other battlefields, if you know someone who saw something they couldn't explain in combat, share it in the comments. These witnesses deserve to be heard, even if we can't explain what they saw, especially because we can't explain it. Subscribe for more stories from the front lines of history, the battles, the casualties, the victories, and the things that walked between them. The Battle of Kursk ended in August of 1943. The burning men were never seen again. But fire remembers, and what burns sometimes doesn't stop.